So we are back now with Esports in Africa, a panel gathering leaders from the African continent that are really shaping the esports industry in the African continent. A lot of us just don't even know what's happening over there. And in the 5 years where we've been organizing the DGC and organizing all these international companies coming to the MENA region, and we've always tried to reach out as well to the ecosystem in Africa. And for the first time, we are able to have 3 great panels. We had a panel before that was generic on the African continent. And now we are having our second panel on esports in Africa. And on our third day, we'll be having the panel on monetization in Africa as well. And with us today is Ife Akintaju, founder of Afrogamers. And we're joined by Nousra Soulaimana, who's sales representative Gameloft for the Africa region, joining us from France. Kevin Meltzer, CEO of Big 5 Games in South Africa. And we are also joined by Désiré Koussawo, co-managing director of ESL France Esports as well. And the panel today is mainly on esports. So I will start by asking a very generic question to the 4 of you. What is the state of esports in Africa today? And as we have a lady with us, let her start, right? Because ladies first, and even in the gaming industry. So Nousra Soulaimana, how is the state of esports today in the African continent?
So there is a lot of few competition in a lot of countries. I can think about Tunisia, Morocco. I can also think about Nigeria, Senegal, Kenya, South Africa, just to name a few and show that it happens everywhere. The only thing now and that we don't really see, and I hope that we will see really soon, is that we will have a really important competition that will be in the European standards, and that where we will be able to make sure that the gamers will be happy to enjoy the games. I'm not saying that it's not happening. There is a few competition that happens. They try to make it cool, and there is a lot of work, and I see, and it's amazing. It's just like now we need to find a way to attract more of the publishers in Africa and focus on that region to make sure that we can enhance the experience and make sure that everyone is happy. So I'm sure some of you will have some comments to add on that. And yeah, that's my first point of view.
So basically, publishers are operational today in Africa or not?
No, they're not really. So the main thing is like they have their servers everywhere. That is mostly in Western countries. And the thing is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from my experience, that clients, when they try to play the games, they still succeed sometimes, but they never really win because they have some disadvantages due to technical aspects. And what it would be nice is to make sure that all the publishers at some point find a way to provide some games in Africa. What we tried, for example, as Gameloft in the past few years is to go alongside with some telecoms and try to provide a more adapted competition through mobile phones, because we're mainly on mobile phones right now, and we try to provide like at least some few competition, but it's not there yet. So we're trying, and I really hope that soon we'll have some good news to share with everyone and be able to say like we have a a good standards esport competition where everyone can enjoy and make sure that they can compete with the rest of the world, because they have everything to compete with the same technology.
Yes. And Désiré, as ESL, for example, how are you able to actually, first of all, give us your idea about the state of esports in Africa? Because I believe you're operational in more than one country in Africa, right? So you can maybe give us an idea of what's happening on the ground.
ESL is not yet ESL is not yet really present in Africa, because ESL is first a PC tournament organizers, and to be honest, today in Africa, PC competitions are not really established. I think for now, Africa is mainly focused on console games like fighting games, and also on with sports games like FIFA, of course, and also a bit on mobile now. And for now, ESL is well known for for its biggest CS:GO, Dota 2, or PC competitions. But we already had some big operations in Africa before. I remember that in 2017, we organized some big CSGO and Hearthstone competitions in South Africa. Perhaps Kevin already heard about that project. It was an African competition at the Rage Expo. Rage Expo is one of the biggest gaming expo in Africa. So we tried to do something there. To be honest, it wasn't really the biggest event we never made in the world, but yeah, there was some interest to test the African market. For now, we try to detect the new developments of interest for our kind of competition and events in Africa, with new sponsors, new partners. And I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident that next year will be the first great year for ESL to make something in Africa. So let's hope that I should be right about it.
Well, let's hope as well. I mean, I would love to see that. I know that ESL but today, Kevin, for example, because I know you've been also organizing a lot of these events, and maybe also you have your network into the different parts of the ecosystem. How do you think this can pick up? Do we need ESL to come in? Do we need Gameloft to come in? Do we need all of these big names to come in order to do something in Africa? Or can we just find also grassroots organizations that can, start it and create their own tournaments, their own teams, their own leagues?
I would say it's a combination of both. When we look at games and esports, it's an ecosystem, and we need to develop our own capability, but we're also part of a global community. And those global competitions, the likes that ESL is running, certainly competitors in Africa want to play against the best and get into those leagues and compete. I would say that the games and esports industry was already growing successfully across the continent, even with all the challenges we face, particularly around data and access and connectivity. But I think with COVID-19, the pandemic, there's been a much bigger focus on it. And it's allowed us as an industry to get much more visibility than we would have ever had before. For those that knew esports before, often people would say that's not a real sport. It went from people saying it's not a real sport to being the only sport that was available on broadcast. And I think that many, many people across the continent that took part in sports betting, when sports came to a stop, all these betting operators around the world introduced esports as front and center as a betting option. And I think that gave a whole new exposure to various people across the continent and introduced them into the world of esports. I also believe that there have been a number of brands now that are looking at the esports industry and gaming in general, and they would maybe not have looked at this as aggressively before COVID came about. The big challenge for us on the continent is support from brands that are investing in this space the same way brands have invested in the sports, music industry, and finance across the continent. And we really do need to get a number of these non-endemic brands, not the computer or technology brands, involved and shifting their spend in sports and entertainment, as I say, into the esports world. And I do think that this time is really going to accelerate the opportunity for Africa. I think that a lot of the challenges we face, particularly not having local servers in country, which make it easier for connectivity purposes and make it more competitive. I think a lot of the publishers will be listening to the African continent this year and into the next year, and hopefully starting to invest in the continent and come to the party.
Perfect. That would be also, it's not that different with the MENA region as well. It's we do have a lot of interest into esports. We do have a lot of the publishers that have based themselves here. Gameloft have their offices here. Riot have their offices here now. Tencent have their offices here. And so many others are also starting to do that. But even when these international publishers come here, they come with certain standards. They come with certain ways that they are used to work in, and sometimes they don't find the talents or the supporting companies that can help them implement what they are looking for as a strategy. And this is why here also, Ife, I wanna get your opinion now on, because you're a gamer, right? You're a gamer. So, and a lot of other gamers. And are we able to create teams, leagues? Do we have the level for the different games? So even as Désiré just said, even if they bring ESL to Africa, you need Counter-Strike champions, right? You need CSGO champions. You need players. Even if another tournament is brought, or maybe we have an African championship, or even Gameloft, you still need gamers that are playing these games, right? Unless we are not talking about doing real tournaments and being part of the important championship, but just of organizing some events with some sponsors. This is a different ball game, right? So from your perspective, what do you think? What's the status of gamers in Africa, of professional gamers in Africa, of professional teams in Africa?
Okay, so let me start with saying Africa is a peculiar region when it comes to esports in general, and that's because you have to put in consideration the financial power of gamers. And that's where, there's a disconnect between console gaming, PC gaming, and mobile gaming. Do teams exist? Yes. Africa would always cater to games that they know first. And that's where you find, FIFA always is always the popular game when you speak to 10 gamers. There's the fighting community of Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, and Tekken. And when you come to the likes of Counter-Strike, it's not as popular. And so if we're going to talk about building leagues, having, tournaments that are actually like the rest of the world, we actually would have to look at what games would apply to, the African region. Counter-Strike will be most popular in northern part of Africa and the southern part of Africa. But when you're now looking at the West and the East, they cater more to, football, They cater to mobile gamers like the Call of Duties, the PUBGs. And as we speak, there are teams and leagues that are happening week in and week out. For example, for West Africa, you have the NPL, which is a league for PUBG strictly, and they do that every quarter, and they're about to start a new one. So me personally, they exist, and just to buttress what Kevin said, what is really missing per se is the support from brands and from publishers and also the developers. Also, as we speak, there is a pro league for FIFA in different countries. We have Senegal hosting their own league for pro league, and that's if you know FIFA well, that is not just one person controlling the total 11, but you have 11 players controlling each player. And they are, Africa is starting to build different leagues around that. So Ivory Coast has a standard league, which is like, football leagues for the pro league in FIFA. Same with Nigeria, same with Ghana. Senegal has the same. So we're having those structures come about. We just need, the stories to be told. I think, and that is where a lot is missing. That's where a lot, like you said, how come we didn't know, this was happening in Africa? What was missing was just the stories being told, content creation. And I think that is where many gamers, most communities also need to focus on. That it's not just playing games, but you need to tell your stories. You need to create content for everyone to see.
And is that your role in Afrogamer? I just want to understand, you are like a community, you are more an organization that is helping to show more about the talents in Africa?
Correct. We basically tell the stories of communities, of gamers. Presently, let me just digress a little bit. Presently, we have a FIFA player in Senegal called Adet Jr. I don't know if you know him. In FUT, FIFA Ultimate Team, he has 30-0. He has not lost any game, even as much as, there's the latency problem, there's the ping. He has 30-0. Only the African community who play FIFA know this. Many do not know this. So where the Afrogamer comes in, we tell stories like that so that the world can see if he needs to represent Africa in the FIFA tournament, the global FIFA tournament, then he should be given a chance for that.
We know a lot about the fact that mobile games is pretty much leading in terms of revenues and sales and all of this, the business side. Mobile games monetize easily in Africa, and it's still the biggest market, not only in Africa, also in the MENA region and around the world. We know that. However, I was just having a lot of conversations during DGC Live now with team owners, with team managers, with experts in the business of esports as well, and we can understand also that if there are not any initiatives that are happening grassroots, that are happening from the African continent, I don't believe that the ecosystem can actually grow by only having the big publishers coming and or ESL coming or some other organizer coming and doing an event and going, or some media company or telecom company sponsoring. In the end, why do you think these sponsors are not happening? Because gaming, esports, everything is happening. But maybe it's easier to advertise on the mobile. Maybe also the penetration of PCs is not the same as in other parts of the world, because there is a heavy equipment when you want to be a gamer and a PC gamer as well, even on the level of the consoles and everything when we see that. So how accessible are these equipments, for example, to the youth in Africa? And just give us an idea of if I'm a passionate gamer and I want to play every day, where do I go? Do I do it from home? Do I go to a cyber cafe? What do I do?
Okay, so for that question,
all of you can answer, by the way.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Shuram, but let me just throw this in. For Africa, once again, the purchasing power also comes into play for gamers and the African youth. If you're talking about a good PC for gaming, you're talking about, at most, if you're going to assemble, do it yourself, you'll be talking about $1,000 and above. Many youths do not have that access, or even if they have that in hand, that is not what they would invest it in. And same goes to console. As much as consoles are between $400 and the new generation consoles that are coming out, and we're speculating $500 and above because they're new generation. The African youths also cannot, majority of them will not invest such an amount. The ones, the elites, yes, they will do so. So, like you mentioned, the mobile gaming, I think, would cut across majority of gamers in Africa. And that's because everyone has a mobile phone or a smart device. So I think that's another avenue, stakeholders in the region should look at and try and take advantage of. You mentioned, where do you go when you need to play game? For now, most people have, gaming centers. There are data centers, like Désiré said before we started. And people, for example, like in Kenya, every weekend, people meet up there, sign up for games and play. So there's also that option, and people are starting to invest in gaming bars. I've come across 2 or 3 people who own gaming bars where you go there every weekend and you play games. So those communities exist and they are building up. We just need more, enlightenment and more focus as to what direction of esports should be top priority, in my own opinion.
Yeah. Kevin, I believe you have invested today in Africa, right? In the gaming industry and the esports industry in Africa, because you're not a publisher, you're not ESL, you are a private investor who believed in that industry and started to do that. So what's your take today on the market? I mean, if we take what Ife is telling us, well, it can make sense why a big publisher is not maybe putting his weight today on the African continent, because in the end, when a publisher is taking a decision, he has a choice. He says, okay, what do? I go to China or I go to Africa? Then I look at an executive is just sitting behind the desk and he'll just look at the numbers, right? So, but then again, when we have people like you that are already investing in the region as well and that already doing something, so give us an idea about the market or about the investment opportunities that are there.
Well, I think there's no shortage across the whole continent of tournament organizers that are week in, week out organizing online esports competitions and competitive video games. That's taking place all across the continent and doesn't need the large international providers, because there are enough in-country providers that are doing this, or people will use software as a service type of facilities to allow them to offer it. I want to concur with something that Ife said around the mobile opportunity. Is the biggest opportunity is mobile and mobile esports. And the reason for that is, that the cost of the PC and the cost of the console that was mentioned is that's very restrictive, and data is also expensive. So these are considerations that African gamers need to look at. We've seen great growth in PUBG Mobile, in Call of Duty. These are games now that on the mobile platform have managed to capture a large audience across Africa, and there are esports competitions that are taking place on a regular basis. And there are also events and places, be it gaming lounges, or particularly in South Africa, large-scale events that take place that bring a huge focus to the esports and games industry. A good example last year was Comic-Con Africa that took place, and the Rage Expo that Désiré mentioned a little bit earlier. And these are large-scale events. Comic-Con Africa last year had 70,000 attendees. The Rage event, which is very much focused on gaming and esports, had 35,000 attendees. So these are large-scale events bringing a lot of focus and a lot of opportunity in the industry. But a large amount of the attention to date has been on PC gaming and console gaming. And we just don't draw the numbers as of yet, the numbers of participants to play the games because of the challenges of cost and data access. And we don't have enough viewership at this stage that makes it a compelling value proposition for brands to shift from sports and the music industry focus into esports. But as I said earlier, this is changing. There's a bigger focus. There are more and more people that are playing games now, and there are more and more publishers that are potentially thinking about their mobile game strategy and how important that's going to be. And maybe not specifically for Africa, but for Asia and Middle East. And therefore the benefit comes through to Africa that there's a mobile focus. There's also opportunities where mobile is not what we think. So I look at something like the Google Stadia wireless controller, that if we can provide, wireless controllers to people that can connect through a mobile device and have a screen available, you then have a controller available instead of playing on a mobile device. And those are potentially greater opportunities in Africa than they are anywhere else in the world.
Do we have Désiré today African esports teams? Can you mention a few? Do we have that professional level of teams?
Yeah, for now, when we go to worldwide competitions, sometimes we try to invite some African teams. We tried to invite some African teams. I know that in South Africa and in some countries like Morocco or Tunisia, we have some high, let's say, I would say high-level teams, but it would pretty be medium-level teams. Yeah, we have some teams in these countries that could try to attend our events, but yeah, we know today that we don't have any let's say top-level teams in Africa to attend our biggest events on CS:GO, Dota 2, or League of Legends major competitions. I think the problem is because we don't have the right infrastructures in Africa to allow teams and players to have the best conditions to train themselves on these games. If you have, I don't know, perhaps 60, 70 or 100 maybe 200 milliseconds of ping, you cannot have the best conditions to be the best player or the best team in the world. So it's also something we have to fight for. We have to talk with publishers to have our own servers on the continent. I think Kenya and Senegal are working on it. I'm pretty sure South Africa could be also a country to host this kind of publishers' data centers. But it's really the first step to have the top-level teams on PC games. But I'm pretty sure that on mobile games, and also on some console games like fighting games, we could have big players. Perhaps not big teams, but big players. It's the same thing in MENA. I know that in MENA you have great champions on FIFA, great champions on Tekken. So for console solo games, I think Africa could also have the best champions for now.
I also agree with you, Désiré, because I think, and this is something that we've been talking a few times together, that Africa, they don't have infrastructures, and that's a big challenge for any publisher that is on PC. But for publisher as us, as Gameloft, who provide like mobile games, we are able to provide, in fact, esport games that could be a change in the industry in general, and also in Africa. This is something that we're trying to push for, and this is something that we've been discussing even before. I mean, some of you already said that we need some sponsors, we need some brands to help us, because developments and all the change and all the elements that we're able to provide are not for free, and for sure that they involve a lot of people behind it. So if we even only do an event offline, we need someone to make sure that the game is available for the gamers, and make sure that they have esports environment. And then after that, if we want to do an online offline event, if we want to make sure that that people goes and see that esport event, we need also people to organize everything, and to do so we need people to sponsor those events. We need people to make sure that that they will play a part in it. So it's good that we have people such as IFE that are able to promote some of the gamers, so then they can attract and show that in some way there is some interest in the industry in Africa. So then we as a publisher, we can go and alongside with companies as ESL say that there is a real opportunity, but I think that it's still not enough. So I hope that by the end of the current situation that we're living with the COVID and so on, after that, people will be more willing to invest in such a product to make sure that they are well organized, and there is a big reach, not only in Africa, but overseas. So then we can show and say that in Africa, there is a lot of things that is happening, because mainly I think the main issue is that there is a lot of things happening already. It's just like it doesn't go outside the country, or it doesn't go outside of the continent. And what we need to do right now is to make sure that the rest of the world knows about what is happening right now in the continent. So then we will be able to attract sponsors, other brands to be like, okay, Africa is a really interesting continent, because there is 60% of the population that is young, that is willing to, in the future, to pay for this and that and whatever. So I will invest in this kind of event for sure.
And I do believe there have been several success stories of gamers that have gone out into the global market and have come from Africa, particularly from South Africa. So a good example would be last year, South Africa sent a team to the Overwatch World Cup that took place, and that was largely crowdfunded with some investment from some sponsors. Another team that went overseas to try and compete in the American market was a esports team in South Africa called Bravado Gaming, and they weren't able to sustain their team overseas just due to the cost. But that team actually ended up staying themselves and was acquired and by an esports team, and ended up with another acquisition, and they actually formed the basis of Cloud9 CSGO team. So Cloud9 today, with their CSGO team, of their 5 competitors, 2 are from South Africa and form part of that original team that left from South Africa to try find fame and glory across in the States, and did manage to make it to the world stage, but as Cloud9 and not as the original team that they went at. The coach of that team is also the original coach that comes from South Africa. So there are 3 participants on a 6-participant team that are coming out of South Africa and are now competing on that global stage for one of the biggest esports teams in the world. Another great success story we had was an esports player that played for Orlando Pirates, and he was picked up by the MLS in America, the MLS E-League that they have, and now plays in Washington, D.C. for the local team there. So managed to go from the biggest football club in Africa across to one of the biggest football clubs in the States and compete in a more high competitive environment where obviously the earnings are a lot larger. And I think that there are a number of Dota players that have gone into Asia, coming out of Africa, and the stories that we should be telling about them and putting them out there, I think, are important so that people can see that there is an opportunity, and because it's a digital competitive space, you can compete anywhere and get to the highest levels. And I think that would also bring brands, telcos, and sponsors into the market by realizing that we do have the talent on the African continent to compete globally and to win globally.
Clearly, I mean, the story that we are hearing now and the stories from your experience, what about, I just wanted to ask something, Kevin, what about the local sponsors? And this question also goes to the rest of you. What about the local sponsors? Are they sponsoring events, tournaments, teams, or it's just at the level of not reaching the critical mass? Because you just mentioned so many of these events that have done so well, like that you mentioned, and so this should give a clear direction to the market, right? Saying that this is something that is reaching an audience, it's good for your brand.
Yes. So for brand sponsorship and partnership, there has been a little bit of disconnect. That is also one of the issues that's been a subject of discussion for different communities as to brands. Fine, you have a few brands who it's a no-brainer for them. They see it as a new opportunity, a new marketing tool to jump on it. But aside, South Africa or Morocco or Tunisia, majority of them have that issue where there's still that misconception of gaming and esports. So once you meet a few people, the first thing they think when you mention gaming and esports, because of how culture has brought a lot of Africans up, they think it's gambling. So you hear certain statements of, our brand cannot support gambling, and you have to do a little bit of, unlearning and relearning for whoever you're speaking to. And that is also affecting, like Ministry of Sports supporting esports in different African countries. Yeah, so most brand managers or...
Just been joined by Igor, I believe, from Madagascar. From Madagascar. Igor, what happened? We just started already.
Yeah, I thought they said the meeting start local time 3 p.m. So.
All right. So maybe it's the time zones. Welcome to the panel.
Yeah.
We were about to wrap up, but anyway, it's good to have you here. And Igor was just finishing on a very important point, which was related to local sponsors supporting the esports. And Kevin just threw a question at him, and also Nousra, like, what's happening with your own teams? And maybe you can also answer that question as well, Go ahead, Igor. Ife, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was saying there's the disconnect, between brands in terms of their education or enlightenment about esports. So when stakeholders approach them for partnership or sponsorship, they have the misconception of either it is gambling, and they come up with their brands do not support such things. So the challenge now is, having to educate majority of them as to what gaming and what esports is, and how it can be beneficial not just to, gamers, but to the African youth and how it can be a tool in social economic change. Most of them don't see it that way. So stakeholders have to add an extra task of not just tournament organization or maybe, pushing out content. You'd have to educate those people as to how esports is beneficial to that. And that is why, we're having problems with them coming on board as sponsors or partners.
I understand.
I think that the first step before anything happen in Africa, I mean, even though there is already a lot happening in the region, it will be for the telecom to make sure that the quality of the internet is good.
Internet is good, yes.
Because sometimes this is one of the aspects that sometimes it's an issue. Sometimes it's just the electricity, depending of the country. That's
electricity.
Have like electricity issue on that, but there is so many other countries where we have a lot of issue with just having access to electricity.
Nousra,
so then
Igor doesn't agree with you. Let him say.
I agree. No, I do agree. I do agree.
I
do agree.
Guys, I can see the five of you. It means that there is electricity. Although Nousra and Désiré are in France, but the rest of you are in Africa, and I can see you. And the internet is doing well. So, but I understand. You have the latency problem anyway because of the servers. You have also, I'm sure that there is no internet connection everywhere. But
I know that I play the devil since the beginning, saying like so many things that must happen. It's not like I want to be I don't want to. I'm not pointing all those things just to point them. It's just like when you really pay attention, it's just like first sometimes in some countries, and I'm not saying all the countries because there are some countries where the internet is okay and that's fine. The only thing is like if you want to go to be a professional on esports, sometimes you need a better quality internet to make sure that you can compete.
But in that case, in such a scenario, Nousra, it is beyond.
We have to let Igor say something before we close.
So that's why I was saying, like,
give Igor a chance.
For the telco to play a part on that. Once we have and we make sure that the telcos will help us on that, for sure it will be easier for that after that to have the publisher, and then after that to make sure that the competition are the best.
But you have so many telcos that are operating in Africa today. So is it an infrastructure problem, or is it a high price to have access to internet, or is, Igor?
I think okay, Igor.
I want to give Igor a chance because since he came, he's been smiling and he's eager to give his own input. Anyway,
come on, Igor.
This is your chance now. After that, we just have a few minutes left. Grab your chance, Igor.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for the opportunity. I would like to say a big hi to Désiré. I've been trying so hard to meet this guy for so long. And Efe, thanks so much. And the pretty lady. Hi, everyone. Well, I would like to say once again, sorry for coming late because of my internet and also a time issue. There are some challenges we face in Africa. I want to talk about Africa because this is where I belong. I think the lady said it already. We are facing a serious problem when it comes to electricity, even internet connections, education among even the gamers, and what we call partnership. Now, how do you really have good event in Africa? First of all, we talk about financial issues. When the telecoms or the other sponsors decide not to help you, you have to come your own way to give a better or good event. Now, this is a case where we have problem with our electricity in this country. As I'm talking to you now, I'm not sure even I can finish this because the light can go off. As soon as the light goes off, my internet has to go off. Now, the same way when I'm organizing events, like an online event, I cannot tell if the other partner have a good internet or have a stable light over there. The light can go off or the internet can go off, and now I become the one, I don't even know how to get up. So we have a lot of problem in Africa, especially even my country, when it comes to internet. The internet, they are not reliable. They can go off anytime and they can come on anytime. The light can go off anytime and they can come on anytime. So when things like this is happening, how do I have a good event? So one of the reasons why I find it very difficult in my country to organize online tournaments or online events. So I believe in, personally with Madagascar, if I have to organize event and I'm doing offline, I have full control of the offline event, which I have to provide extra light in case the light goes off. I have to get maybe 2 or 3 internet standby. Like as I'm talking to you, I use an internet called Selfline. If this Selfline goes up, I have to quickly switch to MTN. But when I'm doing online events, how do I do this? How do I control the players? This is one of the problems Africa is having. So personally, I would like to say I hardly organize online tournaments because of those difficulties. If I can solve them, why not? But this is the issue, I cannot face it. And the internet in my country is a bit expensive. How many gamers have access for router? How many gamers have access for UPS in case the light goes off? The game has to still be controlled. So I believe there's a lot we have to do in Africa when it comes to our stability in the internet, even electricity. Because without power, we cannot do anything. I'm sure you agree with me. Without power, we cannot do anything. And once there's no power, what can you do? Nothing. So let me leave it like this. I want to listen to the wise people as well.
Again, Igor, as you know, we started this panel already around some time ago, and we are about to close this panel. For me, it was really interesting to, and I'm sure for the audience today watching us, to learn about all of these things happening in Africa. I'm sure also that all of you are part of the meeting platform, so I'm sure a lot of the companies that are participating to the event will be requesting meetings with you and also having another call, maybe on some business opportunity or just to learn more about what's happening. So this is happening in parallel to the live sessions, so it's running for 24 hours a day to cater to the different time zones. And I believe and I've been, not only in this panel, I've been hearing so much about the potential of Africa, also from companies that are really investing in the continent. And I think, and this is where I believe that DGC can also play a role, is that you might be able to connect with the people that are also interested in what you are doing. And this will actually facilitate and filter more and maybe create more of an opportunity that will allow for to a little bit at least go across all these problems that you are facing and that are maybe just linked to a few things that can be solved easily and continue on growing the ecosystem. But I still believe that we need to open the African market to and also have more initiatives coming from Africa to welcome. As Kevin said earlier, we need a mix of both. We really need a mix of both, and it's very important to have a good equilibrium. And we all know that big publishers don't come if they don't find an ecosystem, and an ecosystem needs to be there for big publishers to come, and it's always the chicken and the egg somehow on how it can grow. But with the efforts of all of you, I'm sure that it will reach. And I think we have been also planning a lot to. This is the last question I can ask you, and I asked it in a previous panel on Africa. Should we have a dedicated DGC Africa, for example, and just focus on Africa? Whatever we're doing now, we just focus on Africa. What do you think? It would be something that might also help and create more of an opportunity for the African continent, and this is something that we would love to do with your help. This for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Let me say something. Let me say something. Black Lives Matter. So I think it's time. It's time to all of us to make an effort to try something to make this continent grow and shows its power. I'm pretty sure that with some investment, we can do great things on our continent and in Africa. Let me say something. Today, when you want to measure the potential of players in Africa, you come to Steam or to any publisher servers. And the problem is that if you want to measure Steam or publisher servers, they are all on European countries or American countries. How can you discover the power of African players if you don't see any servers in Africa? You cannot, because the audience of Africa is measured on European or African or Middle East servers. That's a problem. So let's try something first, then we could talk about that.
You know, we had another guest at this session, and I don't know why he didn't join, but Olivier Ona from Airtel Telecom in Gabon. It would have been interesting also to have the telco's input on this discussion. He was supposed to be with us. He didn't join us. But I believe that Olivier is speaking again also in the monetization session that we will have on Africa. And I will be asking him some of these questions that you have raised as well. Nousra, we started with you. We can end with you, no problem. So you wanted to say something?
Yeah, as a publisher, what I wanted to say and to add with Désiré, I think that Gameloft or any other mobile gaming publisher, what they can do as a company is try to provide esports games to those to the continents, because we have a potential to reach more people, more gamers through our games, and I think that's we have to push, but we need to have people to sponsor us to be able to say, now we are able to make some really nice events in Africa. I feel like it would be the solution.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.